Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the first ever event of the Abu Dhabi Festival's Art at Embassies. Today's engaging talk on the incredible transformation and vibrant evolution of the UAE's art scene is moderated by editor Melissa Gronlund and features guest speakers curator Maya Al-Khalil and Emirati conceptual artist Meita Abdallah. I would like to begin by welcoming Her Excellency Ambassador Hind Al-Utaiba to the podium to deliver the opening remarks. Your Excellency.
Votre Excellence Huda Kano, Mesdames et Messieurs, les représentants de la Fondation des Arts et de la Musique d'Abu Dhabi, chers conservateurs, éditeurs et artistes, bonjour et bienvenue à l'ambassade des Émirats Arabes Unis à Paris. L'ambassade est honorée d'inaugurer aujourd'hui le programme Art at the Embassies de l'ADMAF, axé sur l'évolution de la scène artistique des Émirats Arabes Unis. Grâce notamment au travail de l'ADMAF, les Émirats sont à l'avant-garde du paysage culturel marqué par le développement rapide d'initiatives et d'institutions artistiques, de maisons de vente, aux enchères, de galeries et de pôles créatifs qui acquièrent une reconnaissance mondiale. Je tiens à saluer Son Excellence Huda Kano, fondatrice et directrice artistique de l'ADMAF, qui a consacré toute sa carrière à inspirer les artistes, les générations et les communautés des Émirats Arabes Unis à s'unir et prospérer. Votre Excellence, c'est un honneur de vous avoir parmi nous. La mission de l'ADMAF, qui consiste à créer, innover, produire, préserver et présenter des œuvres musicales et artistiques inspirantes provenant des Émirats et sa capitale, Abu Dhabi, est fondamentale pour la promotion de notre culture et de notre patrimoine dans le monde entier et constitue à ce titre l'un de nos meilleurs outils diplomatiques. Le travail de l'ADMAF est une promesse faite à la jeunesse de notre pays de positionner les Émirats et notre capitale comme une destination mondiale pour l'art. Elle leur donne les moyens de réaliser leurs rêves et, grâce à des partenariats internationaux, donne la parole à des jeunes artistes qui apportent compréhension et beauté au monde. La culture est une composante essentielle de la mission de l'ambassade des Émirats et un terrain fertile sur lequel notre relation bilatérale avec la France s'est épanouie. Les arts et la culture sont au cœur de nos deux sociétés et constituent donc un pilier de la diplomatie franco-émirienne. L'ADMAF ne pouvait pas choisir un meilleur pays que la France pour inaugurer son programme. Cet aspect de notre diplomatie me tient vraiment à cœur. Je suis très fière, par exemple, d'avoir participé à la réalisation du Louvre Abu Dhabi, une étape clé de notre partenariat culturel avec la France, qui a célébré son 5e anniversaire en novembre dernier. Mais notre coopération culturelle bilatérale ne cesse de se développer et de nombreuses initiatives fructueuses voient-le constamment. Cette année, par exemple, une partie de la collection de la Bibliothèque nationale de France rejoindra des manuscrits de textes sacrés des religions monothéistes présents au Louvre Abu Dhabi dans le cadre de l'exposition Lettres de Lumière. Les Émirats s'appuient également sur la diplomatie culturelle pour faciliter la compréhension entre les nations et renforcer notre coopération. En 2022, nous nous sommes associés au projet Demos de la Philharmonie de Paris qui a permis à 75 enfants émiriens de découvrir la musique classique et d'acquérir des compétences musicales avec 10 musiciens français chevronnés. Ce programme a connu un tel succès qu'il a été reconduit pour une deuxième session sur la période 2023-2024. Je voudrais profiter de cette occasion pour saluer Metha Abdallah pour son incroyable parcours qui l'a amené à être reconnu par la prestigieuse Cité internationale des arts à Paris, où elle réside actuellement. Je ne doute pas que les discussions aujourd'hui mettront en valeur l'incroyable richesse du patrimoine artistique émirati et tout ce que notre pays a accompli en l'espace de quelques décennies seulement. Merci bien.
Please join me now in welcoming to the podium Her Excellency Huda Al-Khamis Kanu, founder of the Abu Dhabi Music and Arts Foundation and founder and artistic director of Abu Dhabi Festival, who will now give the keynote speech. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I won't be long. We all are excited to hear you and hear our stories from you. السلام عليكم. نحن على أبواب العيد وكل عام وأنتم بخير. Very soon we're going to celebrate Eid al-Adha, one of our major festivity. And I wish prosperity to all and happy Eid to all. Excellency, Mesdames et Messieurs, Hind Al-Ateba, our ambassador, je vous remercie, Excellence. Je vous remercie infiniment de nous accueillir en ce lieu magnifique qui est l'ambassade des Émirats Arabes Unis, mon pays. L'ambassade des Émirats Arabes Unis à Paris, on est là pour inaugurer la série d'événements Art at the Embassies d'ADMAF, the Abu Dhabi Music and Arts Foundation. ADMAF organise chaque année un festival à Abu Dhabi qui a l'honneur d'être placé sous le haut patronage honorifique de son Altesse Cheikh Abdallah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, le ministre des Affaires étrangères. Son Altesse Cheikh Abdallah nous a toujours accompagnés de ses bienveillances et de ses conseils précieux. Mais ce que je trouve toujours, ce que j'ai toujours trouvé particulièrement intéressant, c'était précisément qu'un ministre des Affaires étrangères puisse avoir un regard si fin sur les questions de culture et d'art. Et c'est pour ça que je suis là avec vous aujourd'hui. Beaucoup d'entre vous ici présents le savent bien mieux que moi. L'art et la culture sont peut-être les meilleurs ambassadeurs qu'un pays puisse avoir après vous, Votre Excellence. La diplomatie est un art difficile que nos diplomates pratiquent chaque jour pour faire avancer la paix, le dialogue et créer des possibilités nouvelles qu'on a tous besoin. Mais si la diplomatie est un art, l'art peut également devenir diplomatie. Et c'est là qu'ADMAF intervient avec le projet Art at the Embassies que nous inaugurons aujourd'hui. Dans un partenariat novateur, sans doute unique dans le monde arabe, les ambassades des Émirats Arabes Unis nous ont ouvert leurs portes pour que nous puissions exposer et partager avec vous des œuvres d'artistes émiratis, qu'il s'agisse d'art visuel, de musique, de cinéma ou de la littérature. Cette série itinérante offrira aussi des discussions et débats, comme l'échange que nous apportons à écouter aujourd'hui avec des intervenants passionnants, la curatrice Maya Al-Khalil, que j'ai l'honneur de travailler avec elle, la journaliste et auteure Mélissa, qui a travaillé avec nous pour les 2 livres magnifiques qui va nous parler aujourd'hui, et l'artiste Metha Abdallah, c'est le futur Metha, bravo, je suis fière de toi, que je remercie, je vous remercie tous et toutes pour votre présence avec nous, avec moi surtout aujourd'hui. It means the world to me. Thank you. Notre pays, les Émirats Arabes Unis, a montré au monde, comme l'ambassadeur Hind vient de nous parler, a montré au monde à quel point nous souhaitons écouter, à quel point nous souhaitons écouter et apprendre. Le Louvre à Abu Dhabi accueille des œuvres majeures du monde entier. Nous avons ouvert des universités avec un noyau, la Sorbonne et beaucoup plus. Notre Abu Dhabi Festival invite les grands artistes du monde chaque année à se produire sur la scène d'Abu Dhabi. Mais en même temps, on est là et nous souhaitons apprendre et écouter, mais en même temps, nous souhaitons aussi être entendus. Nous souhaitons raconter notre histoire et partager cette histoire avec vous. C'est là la définition même d'une conversation. Écouter et parler, entendre et exprimer. Art at the Embassy est une voix de plus dans cette conversation que nous espérons avec le monde. C'est au cœur de cette conversation que se dessine notre avenir partagé. C'est grâce à l'art des artistes émiratis et des artistes du monde entier que l'espoir peut naître. Par la culture. Par la culture, l'histoire de l'humanité. Nos différences deviennent un enrichissement et non un conflit. Par l'art, la revendication de qui nous sommes devient un partage et non une compétition. On est là pour partager nos idées et je suis là pour vous écouter. On commencera la série d'Art at the Embassy à Paris. Commencer l'Art at the Embassy à Paris me semble très approprié. La France, peut-être plus que tout autre pays du monde, a toujours su marier culture et diplomatie. La langue française est au cœur du rayonnement de la France. Les instituts français, l'action culturelle du réseau diplomatique français, les nombreux accords de coopération entre la France et le reste du monde, et notamment ces accords de coproduction cinématographique, sont les témoins d'une longue tradition de diplomatie culturelle et de culture de la diplomatie. Nous débutons donc Art at Embassies dans un lieu, Paris, qui sait entendre et comprendre notre démarche et la conversation que nous espérons, avec vous. Merci à vous tous pour votre présence à nos côtés aujourd'hui. C'est aussi grâce à vous que cette conversation entre les Émirats Arabes Unis et le monde peut se faire. Et aujourd'hui, particulièrement, entre les Émirats Arabes Unis et la France, est possible. عيدكم مبارك كل عام وانتم بخير وتفضلوا. I'm all yours. We're all yours.
Merci, Your Excellency Huda Kanu. Bonsoir et bienvenue à tous. Je suis Mélissa et je suis ravie d'être ici avec Maya, la curatrice extraordinaire, et Metha, une artiste extraordinaire. Donc, on commence en anglais, mais je veux d'abord dire un grand remerciement à l'ambassade et à l'ADMAF qui nous ont donné un temps de support. Donc, merci. And I'm glad that French part is over. I think my 5th grade teacher would be very pleased with me. I'm really happy to be here. And I think we're going to kick off by starting with Portrait of a Nation, which is the PowerPoint that we're going to scroll through, but we're just going to talk. So these images are just there for your knowledge. It's not going to be synced with the presentation. But this is this exhibition and book and commission that we all worked on during COVID, and which came out in 2022. And since it debuted in Abu Dhabi at the Manarat Al Saadiat, I haven't realized what an incredible project it was. It was something that, in the deep, dark days of COVID, when everyone was holed up, it gave us the time to think through things and to do the not just the research, but the thought, and to make assumptions, and then to turn those assumptions on their heads, and then to question how we were even thinking about the idea of an art history, which was it was a real privilege. And I'm really happy to be back here talking about it with that kind of the reflection of a year since. So Maya was the curator of the exhibition, and what it did is it kind of looked at this question of an art history in the UAE, which has always been a little bit in flux, because there was an art history, but there are many people, even in the UAE, who didn't know this art history, for whom it was invisible in a sense. There were people like Maitha who got to interact directly with it, but it was kind of only known to a certain few. And then one narrative around this artist called Hassan Sharif, I don't know how much everyone is familiar, became the dominant narrative, but kind of overtaking all the other ways that you could think about this history. And what Maya did was that she did the research, she did the oral interviews, she did the interviews in the archives to find many other artists who were kind of left out of that story, or whose stories were kind of bound up in this larger narrative. And the specificity of their own contributions had been eroded. And so Maya titled the exhibition Beyond Narratives, which is a really beautiful way of this kind of dialectical thinking that I was talking about, that this idea of a narrative, of an art history that this exhibition was proposing, but at the same time beyond narratives. What does a story do to art history, and what does it leave out, and what does it push to the side in our desire to make sense of something? So that's kind of the framework for what we're here, why we're all here discussing it together. And then we created these 2 great books, as Mrs. Kanu said, and they are great, not just because I edited them. They're genuinely, people were very generous with their time and thoughts, so they're very good contributions. I honestly think that. And Maitha was one of the artists who was commissioned for the exhibition, which also had a number of original commissions. So a lot of original work made for this enormous exhibition that juxtaposed historical paintings and historical work, which are mostly in painting, but not all, as we will see, and new work by a generation, Maitha's generation, and even younger. So I think let's start with your work. And could you talk a little bit about kind of how you begin making the work you made for Portrait of a Nation, and also the work that you're making at the Cité residency right now?
Hello everyone. With my work, and I think we talked about it a lot, Melissa, but I start my work by my love of stories and storytelling. So as a child, even before I had started painting, I knew that I had passion for stories and storytelling. And growing up with my grandmother, who fed into that passion as well with her stories and the mythologies and that she used to tell us as kids, me and my sisters, I think it nourished that love for stories. And then growing up, I had decided to mix both, my love for stories and storytelling and theater, but as well use different mediums to bring those stories to life, such as painting and sculpture and performance.
And you, this is the work that you just premiered, I mean, just like last week practically at Basel, but you use a lot of different symbols or elements from folk tales.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Of course. So growing up, so I have to talk a little bit about my childhood because everything is related, right? Like with an artist, like everything is related to the final result. And growing up, I grew up with 5 other sisters. So, and I was the second, and I always wanted to somehow like feel unique in the family, and but that never happened. So I was just like another girl among like 5 other girls. So I found this love for writing and stories, and as I said, living with my grandmother who had told us all of these folk tales. One of the stories that she used to say, because she lived in kind of like a farm, old house in a village, it was a city called Khorfakan, and she had a lot of chicken and roosters. And she always used to say, like, if you hear a chicken, ask God for forgiveness because there are angels around. And it was believed that, or she believed, and some of other people believed that the rooster can see angels. So it used to terrify me in a certain way, but also excite me as a kid to hear a rooster and imagine that there are like angels around. So growing up, I developed a few characters, the rooster, the pig, and recently the donkey. And you see them appear a lot in my work. The rooster representing right and forgiveness and light. And then on the other hand, the pig being a sinful animal in the region, representing wrongful and sin and dark. And then the donkey, which is another story that is said, the donkey can see the devil. Therefore, if you hear the donkey, then the devils are around. So I developed these characters of half human, half animal creatures, either in a fight or in an intimate situation or in a conversation. And I like to put them in kind of like a theatrical setting in my work, either in a painting, a sculpture, or in performance. So yeah, it's a mix of storytelling. I start by writing these stories and developing the characters and then moving them to different settings.
But these characters come out in so many different ways. They come out in sculptures, they come out in performances, you also depict them. Is there a shift in your work? Have you moved to making it more performative, or has it been constant through how you have approached these kind of cast of characters that you started out with?
To me, it always starts by a performance. It always starts by imagining. I feel like the way I work is extremely visual. The way I think is visual, and therefore the work starts by writing and then just performing it either on the canvas or on the sculpture or in an actual performance. So, but it all comes together in an installation where the viewer can kind of experience something that would look like a backstage of a theater. That would, include the walls, include the ground, the tiles. So it's all kind of like an experience.
Yeah. Maya, can I bring up this idea of stories in history and talk to you about this? What is the importance of art history to a developing art scene? You know, why should it be significant that an art scene should know what came before, and what are the particular consequences of the way that the UAE sometimes knew what came before and sometimes did not?
When we started working on the exhibition, it was there was the idea that we needed to maybe revisit some of the stories that we already know, and very much looking at the early years. Now, I must note here that there have been a number of initiatives and great projects that were looking at the development of the art scene in the UAE. To name just a few, for instance, 182 Today, the exhibition that Sheikh Ahwal Al-Qasimi curated at the Venice Biennial in 2015, but also, but we cannot see them, also curated at NYU Abu Dhabi by Maya Allison in 2017. But what we did here is that we looked at very early on at how it all started. And with the founding of the nation, it was intrinsic that the founding of the nation has to be accompanied with founding of cultural institutions. It goes hand in hand. So we were looking at a number of stories, and we were looking at developing a timeline. But again, when you looked at a timeline is not only a series of events and dates and mentioning of places. A timeline is also a narrative, and this is a narrative by definition are built on stories and on perspectives. What do you include?
Just going to interrupt quickly. This timeline that Maya is talking about is the thing that everyone talks about. It is the first time that actual dates were written down so that people knew what happened when in the UAE, and it's been an enormous resource for scholars since. So I think when we did it, or when you put it together and we put it in the book with Roxanne Zand, we just thought it was, I don't know, a dry thing we were putting on paper, and little did we know that this was the thing that we get the most feedback on. It's this double-page spread of a timeline. Go on.
Yes, because it was the outcome of multiple conversations, multiple viewpoints, looking at the scene as a map rather than as a chronological, a series of chronological events. And if I want to quote the French philosopher Emmanuel Kocha, who said, "Who cares about chronology?" in a way. So we're not talking about chronology, and it's true because there's an overlapping. It's always happening that we talk about the older generation, but also we're talking about building the places where art needed to take, the spaces at the beginning from early 1970s. The exhibitions were taking places in art, in social clubs, in football clubs, in libraries. I mean, the first exhibition took place at the inauguration of the radio of Sharjah Radio, and that was by Ahmed. Remind me here, Alantai. And then there was an effort to create these places. In 1980, early 1980, we have the founding of the Cultural Foundation, which idea started early 70s by launching a competition to build the cultural foundations. It opened in 1981 in Abu Dhabi, then the Emirates Fine Arts Society in Sharjah in 1980, actually before. But at the same time as we have this plot and foundation, the building of the foundation, we had also a movement in the 80s where it was about the breaking away from these places, of bringing art, taking art outside the confines of place and to the community, to the people, to the streets. And somebody who is extremely important during that period was Hassan Sharif, and the artists that congregated around Hassan Sharif. Because that was the time also, maybe we're moving into a second period in that chronology, where we're moving off in that effort to really to subvert, to contradict, to break from the official ways of understanding art, or the traditional way of understanding art. And it wasn't only, even at the time, it wasn't only about artists. It was artists, poets, writers, journalists. Even one of them was a judge. I mean, so it's very much multidisciplinary, with Nujum al-Ghanem, with Khalid al-Budur, with the group around Hassan Sharif, Muhammad Qazem, Muhammad Ahmed Ibrahim, and the rest. And it was, how can we move away from, how can you define a new way of talking about art, or what does art mean? We go through that period, and then we're now in the beginning of the year 2000, and this is, it's here also, it's like, this is where the rise of also the market in Dubai, but also it's also the consolidation of the movement that was happening in Sharjah, with Sheikh Al Qasimi heading the Sharjah Biennale that started in 1993, but for the first time had an artistic direction in 2003. But also it was the underground that was taking place, but also there was the rise of the project, the mega project, and the global foundation, the global institution in Abu Dhabi, or the plans for these mega projects in 2006 when they were launched. So it was a scene that was extremely thriving. Each city taking also a position in a different way of presenting, addressing the art and cultures in a different directions. That takes, yes.
Can I segue just quickly to Maitha, because the Emirates Fine Arts Society that Maya was talking about, which opened in Sharjah in 1980, was as Maya's research shows, was a really important political center for all the people of the Arab world who were kind of had to leave their home countries because of strife in the region, came to Sharjah as a place of kind of political stability, and this idea of nationhood that Maya talks about was so important, because I think there was an unofficial motto for the Emirates Fine Arts Society, which was, what politics disperses, art unites. So it was really the idea of this kind of, the UAE as a nation bringing people together. But what's really fascinating about Maitha's generation is that she was able to link back up with that generation that Maya was talking about. And you actually co-curated or assisted the curation of one of the 2016 annual exhibition at the Emirates Fine Arts Society, yes, with Mohammed Al-Mazrui. So yes. I'm just going to get your voice in there and then go back to you. And how, that kind of multidisciplinary nature of the scene that Maya was talking about, it feels very, that was one moment in time, and kind of as the scene has matured, it's become more and more segregated into different media. But you talk about that moment as a moment of pure interdisciplinarity, and could you talk about that a bit more?
So I was extremely lucky to find a great mentor at a very at the start of my career, which was artist Mohammed Al-Mazrui. So by the age of 18, I had started traveling solo. I left the house. I wanted to find my voice. I wanted to find myself. And I had struggled with ideas, and I did not know how to bring my art forward with the stories that I want to tell. So by the time I was back, I met almost immediately, even before I complete my studies in college, I had met Mohammed Al-Mazrui, who is an established artist from the United Arab Emirates. And at that young age, I was exposed to the art scene. I had understood how to navigate my way through. Met Hassan al-Sharif before he passed away through Mohammed al-Mazrou, and I had the opportunity to sit with him and talk about his work. And yeah, that's when Mohammed al-Mazrou had asked me to co-curate and assist curating the Emirates Fine Arts Society exhibition. And it was an opportunity that was massive even before I had graduated university to get that opportunity and to co-curate and go visit artist studios that are like important in the art scene. It just shaped what my work is now. And the funny part is I've never seen Mohammed al-Mazrou paint all of this time, and it's like he's been my mentor, but I've never seen him paint, which is very funny because everyone asks me like, so how was it like when he paints? And it's like, I never seen him paint. I spent a lot of time with this man, like just listening to his way of thinking, his philosophy about life, but never seen him even sketch, but what he did, because he wasn't only a painter, he was also a poet and a writer and a storyteller. So he inspired the way I work now in many ways. How I link my stories and my writing to the final work that I do, to the final outcome. So yeah.
Amazing. I mean, his paintings, you'll see, again, in Maya's curation, she's put together Mohammed al-Mazrou and Maitha's paintings side by side, and you can really see the resonances between them. But so getting back to this market, because I feel like the market is the thing that kind of comes and changes everything. Can you talk about, like, when Art Dubai comes in and when the galleries start coming in Dubai, what are the effects on the art world?
It was a moment during the early, from 2000 up in 2008, because 2008 was quite an important worldwide event. This is the financial crisis. But up until then, there was such an energy that's happening. It was the rise of Dubai as an art market. It was the opening of Art Dubai also. It was the launch of a Brush Capital Prize. There was the gallery system that was also operating. Christie's also entered the market. So that in parallel to what's happening in Sharjah and Abu Dhabi. And that carries us up until 2008, the financial crisis. And this is where there was a sudden realization that we actually need to go back to the basic. We need to build the infrastructure. We need to build the art education. Art education, there was no art education before. Up until 2002, this is when Sheikh Zayed inaugurated their first Department of Art and Design. And Sharjah University opened a college for fine art and design in 2002. But even up until 2008, this is when there was sudden realization that we need to reinforce that base. And we see the rise of even within the commercial initiative like Art Dubai, like Abu Dhabi Art. Abu Dhabi Art launched Beyond, which is a focus on emerging artists. Art Dubai launched Artists in Residence, also their program, and Campus Art Dubai. So Sheikh Salama bin Hamdan opened the SIF, which is the Salama Emerging Artist Fellowship with RISD. So that was a consolidation phase. And from 2016, this is when we realized there was a more concerted effort to look at that past. And this is when I was mentioning these multiple exhibitions that started looking at what happened early on. I think, Maysa, you were part in one of them, is Old Gold, that was curated by Christiana De Marchi and Mohannad Al-Ali. And that paired emerging artists with their forebears, with one of their forebears. And I don't know whether you want to talk about it, but that experience, and for a number of them, the curator was saying, they did not know about the work of these early artists. And not the work of the early Emirati artists only, but also the work of the early Arab artists that were part of the scene, that were teaching at the ministries of youth at the time, and they were part also of the Emirates Fine Art Society. So
I remember seeing that show. I think it was the first work I saw of yours, and when I did a studio visit with you years later and was totally blown away by your work. I was driving home, and I remember driving up Airport Road, and I was, oh, that was the same woman I saw those years ago.
It was my first performance video.
Who were you paired with?
I don't remember. I don't remember. It was a very long time ago.
It was a long time ago. Could you speak a bit about performance? Because that's something that you talk about performance being the genesis of all your work. But I think when you see a painting, that's not obvious how that is.
I mean, I had this question asked to me, like, actually last night. I was at a friend's studio, and, you know, just getting to know people that were there. And someone asked me, like, what is your medium? And I was like, well, painting, performance, and sculpture. And he was like, but what is your favorite? Like, what do you feel like mostly attached to? I started thinking, I don't think I have a favorite. This is what I thought. I don't think I have a favorite, but I have like one medium that is crucial to everything that I do, which was performance. And they were like, why so? You know, why is performance? And I think I find myself performing every time I work, whether it was like a painting or a sculpture, you know, or the video. It always starts with me performing. I start by laying the canvas on the floor. I start by tracing my body. It always has to do with the movement. I paint using my fingers. I rarely use a brush. You know, with the sculpture, with the clay, it always starts with me performing and setting the stage to kind of allow me to create the work. And I see my work, like the final outcome of the work is an, you know, the outcome of a performance. It's like the end of the performance that had already taken place in the studio. So yeah,
It's a really nice way
that
to-
answers the question. So yeah, I would say like performance goes in
I can see how your work is like a theater set of something that started in the private space of and then kind of explodes into the public space. We're going to open it up into questions. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I have a question. But if anyone, any burning questions, otherwise I'm going to jump in and ask mine. On this question of performance, because that is something that is often left out of the history, or not even left out of the history, it's seen as something that wasn't in the history to begin with. But you know, it did actually play an important role. And could you speak about what you discovered?
Well, I mean, since the 80s, performance was part of a number of artists, many generations. We have from the performance of Hassan Sharif to Muhammad Qazim, Nujum al-Ghanem, Ibtisam Abdulaziz. We just see her now here wearing her. Actually, this is a very interesting performance. Anyway, I'll talk about it later. But so there were several reasons, according to several contexts, of why performance was taking place. So there is performance as rebellion, as against prescribed or accepted forms, and it was interdisciplinary. The work of Hassan Sharif, play, but also performance that was based on gesture to explore abstract concepts. For instance, I'm just going to read something that Mustafa Ghazal wrote in 1985 in Al-Ittihad. And he's describing an exhibition that took place in the souk, and I think in the souk, where Hassan Sharif, in just an hour before having announced the exhibition and people coming to see that exhibition, stage this exhibition. He gathers rocks, he gathers paper, he draws circles, rectangles on this. So Mustafa Ghazal calls it the most bizarre modern art exhibition in the UAE. Suspended rocks, scattered papers, and old watches. And the reason why Hassan Sharif did stage this exhibition, and not only him, I think there was also Nujum al-Ghanem that was part of it, and other artists, in the mall next to the gold souk, it's also to really reflect on the idea of what is value, and how do you define value. So art, in his opinion, he writes, is like a game, and therefore shouldn't be taken seriously, with the condition that it is played properly. The artist conceived these installations as his way to the exhibition and 3 hours before visitors arrived. He happened to find a collection of old rocks and hung some of them on the wall and stacked others on the ground. He drew squares, rectangles, circles, and numbers on a bunch of paper. He pinned them down to the ground and surrounded them with a nice frame. Now, this is one of the positive, or more or less positive, comment on these exhibitions. There were a lot of backlash, of course, about is this art and this is not, this is making fun of us. But so in a way, so artists was really wanted to break these norms of operating. There was also performance was as defined as a site for interdisciplinary and shared concerns, and this is when we talk about, for instance, Nujum al-Ghanem. She mentioned that they were influenced with the Dada movement, and even though it's a movement that was in the early 20th century, but for the UAE artists, it was relevant in the 70s. This is when it was relevant for them in the 80s. Also, this idea of breaking away, but also the idea of really bringing together with Hassan Sharif, with a collective, and discussing shared concerns. There was also a performance as an exploration of the body, and this is where the work of Ibtisam Abdelaziz came into play. This is a performance that early 2000 took place in Sharjah. So Ibtisam Abdelaziz wore this costume, all with green numbers, and these numbers were the tickets that she collected, her bank tickets that she collected over a year, that she printed them on the costume. And it is a comment on a changing sociality, a changing consumerism, a fast-moving society, changes that were taking place. And it was quite daring for a woman in Sharjah to be performing and to be recording this performance. And Mohammed Qasim also explored the body with the moving tongue in 1994. Also, the urban mobility and the implied photograph of the flag, also where he's looking at space, empty spaces, empty lots with a flag, and with his back behind the photograph. And it's a comment also on a perception, on positioning a body within a place that is changing. And when we talk about Portrait of a Nation Beyond Narratives, we divided it as thematics. This is where I go back to the thematics, because the thematics were taking place across generations. And the thematics that artists were talking about, they're talking about the idea of home. How do you redefine how, not home as a domestic place, but home also the idea of belonging. So a number of artists were talking about this idea with shifting idea of belonging throughout the years, throughout generation. We're talking about a shifting landscape, the changing that were taking place on a continuous and a very fast pace. We're talking about also congregations of togetherness, how these artists were coming together and moving apart, the influence of Hassan Sharif on these groups, but also influence of maybe Beit 15 later on, very early on, where a group of young artists, emerging artists, came together also to act as a collective. And then it's about redefining, reimagining language. Also the language, this is again the performance of an artist called Moza Matrouchi, a young artist who performs the movement of bakers and confectioners. And she translates these movements into an alphabet. Again, the choreography of the body within the place of a kitchen. And so translating that choreography into an alphabet, and again, obviously tackling the politics of food, but also of a multi-ethnic, multicultural society. So we talk about Ibtisam Abdelaziz, Ala Idris also. There was, I think, Ala Idris did a fantastic project where in the toilets of men and women, she put you suddenly have her face that shows and her reading Alice in Wonderland. Again, daring performance, but also putting your body in places where you're not supposed to be. That's an image. She wasn't there. I think I'm elaborating too much.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, that's the thing. The history is so rich, and there's so much more that needs to be discovered, and also so much more that needs to be thought about what we already know. There was a really poignant detail that you said in the Al-Ittihad review, or maybe it wasn't the Al-Ittihad review, but the other reviews, that people thought they were making fun of them. You know, that kind of emotional shock response to something that they didn't understand. And it is extraordinary when you think. I mean, that was in the 1980s when was the suit performance?
1985. I mean, the first, 1983, 1985. Negative positive was in 1983. So quite.
So not really that far ago.
Not that far
along.
ago.
And now you think the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi is opening up. I mean, there's a tendency in the Gulf to use superlatives, but it really has been an incredible transformation. And also, not just in the way that we have artists like Maytha now, but the public has moved along with it. Now you don't have this idea of this skeptical, angry public, who thinks they're being taken for a ride. You have a public who's keen, who visits exhibitions in the middle of COVID, who buys books, who wants to do PhDs. It's quite an extraordinary thing. I think we're gonna end on that note. But if anyone has any questions, and if not, we'll continue the conversation over drinks and canapes in the room beyond.
It's just a comment and not a question, but working close with you all, I noticed that from the 60s up to today, but during the 60s in particular, and moving forward, and correct me if I'm wrong, but through I discovered that there were a space of free creative space. Like the artists who were coming from the Arab world, it was the place for them to get together and togetherness. There were a togetherness that you explained to me, supporting each other, and then the freedom to create. I remember Manal al-Dwayhan from Saudi Arabia. She started, and her pieces are today in the most important museums of the world, if I may. I can claim I have one. So, but this could not have happened at that time in Saudi Arabia. She had to be in the UAE. And that was for me a wonderful revelation. And that's why today I feel Maytha Abdallah can create what she can create. No censorship. It's the whole tale, the whole story. I mean, we can have many people will be with or against or controversial ideas, but that's art. And this was a beautiful revelation. I mean, to know that for me was wonderful. I just wanted to comment on this. Thank you.
I think that's a beautiful way to end it, and I think we should continue all the voices together speaking about this subject. Thank you very much for having us again. It was really fun. Thank you.